Got it. And we are live. Hello, Internet. I'm glad that you guys have all tuned in today. But I want to give you some time first. So go ahead, go get your little notebook, go get your little pen so that you can write down some notes because me and Nick are talking about some big ideas today. Aren't we, Nick?
I think so, yeah. Maybe one or
All
two.
right. Cool. All right. So I hope you guys had some time. I'm just going to fill the space a little bit more. Go get your water. Did you already go to the bathroom? I hope so. I hope you're all wrapped up because we are starting right now. Right, Nick?
I think so.
Okay. Hey there, Kandice here, and I am super excited that you guys decided to tune in this Thursday afternoon because today we are talking about everything that you need to do to fine tune your messaging. Now, there are many problems that people face with messaging, but we are going to be talking about how to level that up so that you can generate new business. But I have a special guest here, Mr. Nick Ribello here. And Nick, what do you think is one of the main problem business owners face when it comes to their messaging?
So I think one of the biggest problems that many business owners end up facing when it comes to their messaging is just not really telling their own story effectively, as well as not really showing the unique qualities of their business and how that really translates into a benefit for their customers.
Yes, meaningful messaging. I love it. But today, like I said, we're giving you new opportunities to change that because we have a special worksheet for you. It is called a Say This, Not That worksheet. I'll give you 10 words to either change in your messaging to make it stronger or maybe remove because it weakens your messaging. So, I'm only going to give it to you if you ask for it. So make sure that you drop a comment down in the comment section saying, hey, Kandice, I want it, and I will connect with you after the show. But first things first, the reason we are here today, Nick, if somebody is tuning in, they realize that their messaging needs some help and they just don't know where to start. What is step one?
So step one, I think really the main thing to keep in mind here is that when it comes to those meaningful messages, they'll always resonate with your customers, while boilerplate information really is just kind of going to be forgotten. Your messaging encompasses so much more than really just what's published on your website. It's everything ranging from service pages, homepage, blog posts, any email campaigns that you're running, social media posts, as well as the way that you're talking to your customers. So what you want to do in order to make sure that your messaging is resonating with your customers is pay attention not only to what you're saying, but how you're saying it. This really translates to identifying, like I said earlier, what makes your company stand out, and then how that's going to translate into a benefit or a profit for your customer, and then communicating that through your content.
So it's super interesting that you talk about your messaging being more than just your website copy. Like there are a whole bunch of different platforms that your message is on in your blogs and on your social posts. But business owners sometimes have so much communication going on that maybe they forget about these options or they're just not paying super close attention to it. How do they ensure that their voice is branded across all platforms?
So the big thing with this is really tone. When it comes to messaging, tone is something that's very important. So much of communication and emotion is carried through the tone of your voice. And this is something that's often lost in text format, and we don't really think about it too much. Um, but oftentimes, especially like in a Facebook message or an Instagram DM, customers will contact a business asking a question or trying to get help with a problem, and the business owner might respond with a short little response that they think is kind or friendly in some way, but the customer that's received it thinks that they're bothering the business owner or that the business owner is rude, just because the tone doesn't really line up with maybe what's shown on the site or just what you expect when you're dealing with someone. So really, it's a large part of identifying how you want to talk to your customers, how you feel that they want to be treated, and then making sure that the content on the site lines up with that, as well as just how you're talking to them when you message them.
Yes, and it's ugh. I'm sorry, my dog is snoring in the background, and you're just hitting things on the head today, so you kind of caught me off guard there. But it's so interesting that you were talking about how those conversations in the DMs might be different than conversations or things that you're writing on your blog post or your website copy. Because that's something that I'm working on myself. Now, I write the social media for BizIQ and I write tons of copy everywhere. But sometimes when somebody DMs us, there was like a disconnect for me. So it's something I'm working on right along with you guys. But Nick, you sound super knowledgeable and you have been giving us a ton of things to think about. But how do you know all this?
So I am the content specialist and copy editor for the organic accounts over here at BizIQ, which basically means that I manage all of the content that our teams are producing for the websites of our organic accounts, which basically means I'm ensuring that it remains accurate, not only in terms of the products and offerings that they have, but also accurate to the established brand voice that those companies had when they came over to us, which really just means going through all of the content that they had on the site previous, as well as talking to them on the phone, interviewing them, and really getting an idea of how they talk to their customers, and how that needs to be communicated in content going forward. Outside of that, I also have been a writer basically all my life. Before coming over to BizIQ, I actually attended the University of Oxford for a master's in poetry, which really just made me hone my own creative voice and has given me those skills to be able to identify voice in other pieces and how people are talking about something in their content.
Yes, and I am glad that you sprinkled in your master's from Oxford because I was not going to let you walk away without dangling that sweet carrot in front of us today. Now, y'all don't know this because maybe you don't talk to Nick every day, but he is a wordsmith, like master of words. Every time that he speaks, I walk away and I'm like, I learned something today. Maybe a pizza is really a burrito or a calzone or whatever you want to call it. But I do want to jump into our next topic here. We've been talking a lot. Nick, we talked about those first steps that business owners need to take, but what is the next step?
So I think the next thing really is just focusing on adjusting your social media responses and communication to be in line with that voice that you've created. Like we were discussing earlier, a lot of times, a lot of businesses will put in that effort to actually create a consistent voice. Sometimes it might be like a friendly or familiar voice on their website, but then when they receive messages or comments on their social media, the responses that they're giving just don't really line up with that. It can be something as simple as just kind of feeling flat or wooden or typed out by a robot, or even just being overly salesy, which is another one that's going to turn someone off. Because if you were attracted to a site because of how friendly and familiar it felt, and then when you contact them and they're suddenly trying to make a sale, it just turns you off and you don't want to go with them. I think the handout that you've produced also has some really good examples of this, various types of language and practices to use, as well as things to avoid in these interactions.
Oh, I gotta just say hey to Julia because I definitely will be sending you our handout after. And I'm glad that you guys can't hear my dog snoring because it's loud over here and I was getting a little nervous. But Nick, I do want to talk about something that you mentioned earlier, how it's kind of surprising and not surprising that this can be extremely difficult for small business owners because it can be really tough to just arrive at that all encompassing, all embracing messaging that is simple but both appealing. Do you have any tips for business owners who are kind of in that middle and are struggling to find the je ne sais quoi of their messaging?
Yeah, I don't know that my answer is one that people are really going to like, but realistically, I understand the drive to find that all embraces message. But unfortunately, that is kind of the problem sometimes. What we want is personalized communication. That's what communicates to your customer that you value their time or that you want to help them, rather than just seeing them as another sale. You kind of discussed this in your handout, but things like talking directly to them, using their name, using inclusive language like we to communicate things like you identify their problem and see it as a problem for yourself as well as their success making you happy. These are the kind of things that foster that feeling of familiarity with your customers that an all encompassing message just really doesn't provide you with.
Yes. Now, let's review, shall we? Our first tip that Nick gave us was meaningful messaging. and making sure that there is personalization around your messaging. And then his second tip was really just making sure that your tone is branded and in line with any other messaging that you're pushing out. And then the third thing I want to talk about is just our Say This, Not That handout. It's changing the way that you will communicate with your customers. So drop us in the comment section below if you want to get a copy. But Nick, give us your one final pro tip.
So the last tip that I would give that really factors into this is just to really be responsive with messaging on social media, especially. Your responsiveness, it needs to be done in a timely manner, and this right, like it's really going to vary. There's no written rule, but people give more time for an email to be responded to versus if you send a DM, they're expecting a pretty quick response or they're going to move on to a different business. Um, there's a variety of ways that you can achieve this. One great method is maybe setting some shifts between you and your employees, where for the next 2 hours, you're responsible for responding to social media messages. And then once that shift ends, it moves to someone else. As your business continues to grow, you may need to hire an employee who solely handles the social media messaging, which is a great problem to have. I mean, it means you have so many people contacting you through Facebook and Instagram that you had to hire an employee just to talk to them.
Yes, I love that. And Nick, we did have a question come in, and since you are our special guest today, I hope that you can provide some thoughts around it. But Julia said, so it's not a good idea to go with blanketed responses. And what's the average time to respond to a DM and an email? Those are two questions, but what do you got?
So two separate questions. So for the blanket responses, I would say yeah, for the most part. If it's a blanket response to a frequently asked question, that's something that you could include a frequently asked questions on your site. But realistically, if someone DMs you with a question, you want to take the time to respond to them, like we said earlier, mentioning their name and really identifying what their problem is. It's certainly possible that their problem is a problem that many people have, but it's always going to go it's going to go much better with them if you actually respond to them with what looks like and is not handwritten, but like a currently written message rather than something that you can kind of tell when something's just been copy pasted. Um, and then for response times, I mean, I know you handle this as well. I think with DMs, if it's outside of about 10 to 15 minutes, usually the person has moved on by that point. Versus like an email, as long as it's within the same day sometimes is not like marked as urgent, that's usually fine. But yeah, I would say with instant messages, I think about 10 minutes is about as much as you can get away with before they're going to move on.
Yeah, I can't remember the specific numbers right now, but it's something like if you respond to a lead or somebody who sent you a DM within 10 minutes, you're like 300% more likely to close that deal. Because what's going to happen is they are sending you a DM, but right after they don't receive an immediate response, they're going to go to your competitor and then they're going to submit a DM there and try to get their solution provided by them. And it's really just whoever can answer first. So at that point, you're kind of at the mercy of answering as quickly as you can. But when you're dealing with some customers, they understand, hey, you do have an entire day planned. They might be more forgiving than others, but at your earliest convenience would definitely be my suggestion. But before we take off, if you're tuning in right now, and I know Julia is, please comment loving it down below because it helps the algorithms. We want you to tell the algorithms that you love our content and that we love you and that you want to see more of the awesome content we're producing. So make sure that you're doing that down below. And Nick, give us a recap. If there's something that a business owner needs to take away from this conversation right now, what is it?
So, I mean, like I said before, I think some of the main things really are just making sure that your voice and tone really is coming through in your content, lining that up with what you're trying to say. So, right, if you're trying to present yourself as a friendly face or a friendly business, that needs to be communicated in the content. If you're trying to appear more distant or some type of professional organization, that needs to be done as well. And then just really keeping in mind that every customer is unique and that you can't really use these cookie cutter approaches when you're directly communicating with them. and that if you want them to be happy with you and your services, that requires you to truly listen and then interact with them on an individual basis.
Yes, that is a wrap for this week, folks. I hope you guys were taking notes because we got some nuggets here today. Thank you, Nick, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to share some thoughts with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And a special thanks to you, our lovely audience. Shout out to Julia for tuning in and just being here with us during this afternoon. Alrighty, folks, I hope you have a lovely weekend and catch me next Thursday right here, same time, same place, so we can chat some more. Alrighty, folks, I will see you then. Bye. And now we're going to jam out.